Previously on Gallant Havoc. So late last year was the release of the legend that is God of War Ragnarok. And lo and behold, God of War Ragnarok is the reason I want to get a PS5, which I have yet to do. But for now, I will settle with playing it how I can. Now if you'll excuse me, Ragnarok. Calm and reasonable. I am a calm and reasonable person. I'm not hot and bothered by this. Why would I be hot and bothered by this? I'm not hot and bothered by this. Why would anyone think that? I'm not. God of War Ragnarok. Folks, let me tell you from the get-go. This is a great game, dare I say a masterpiece. Game of the year, not just for me, but for a lot of other people. Sure, it lost to Elden Ring, but I'll give credit where credit is due. Elden Ring was a masterpiece in its own class. But Ragnarok, for me, was my game of 2022. And here's why. God of War Ragnarok is the long-awaited sequel to the hit 2018 God of War. Now, I'm not one to say that if the predecessor is good, the sequel will be the same, but goddamn, this may be just as good, if not better. I unfortunately have yet to get a PS5, so I had to play on my PS4 Pro, which while sounding like Goku going Super Saiyan 3, it ran surprisingly well with very few instances of frame drops, stutters, and pop-ins. The gameplay is very intuitive for returning fans of the 2018 installment, with a few differences and additions here and there to make it feel more than just a rehash of what came before. As direct sequels should, in my opinion, with some exceptions. But anyway, it feels extremely familiar and it felt like returning home. Didn't help that I played the first one all the way up until Ragnarok came out, but still. While the gameplay feels familiar, some of the differences left a bit of time to be adjusted. Mashing triangle doesn't always bring your axe back, for example, instead swapping it out for a weapon charge save for if you have the axe equipped and throw it. Not saying it's necessarily a bad thing, but old habits die hard, especially when playing the first game for the past 4 years. Plus, they swapped out the about face button that would spin Kratos around 180 degrees to quickly snap to enemies behind you, instead making it a simultaneous button input, and replaced it with a new weapon option, slight spoilers, the spear. Which I must say was an awesome addition and nod to Kratos' Spartan heritage. Speaking of, the amount of nods to the old games without being too pretentious and not trying to replicate the Blades of Chaos scene in its predecessor was also a very good call. There's one part where Kratos' family from the original games is brought up, and the character he is talking to dodges a god-killing bullet, mocking him as if he had never had family before. Anyway, like its predecessor, the game utilizes a semi-open world again. And instead of just replicating the old map of Midgard, they changed it up enough to feel entirely unique and different, not to mention entirely on ice. My God of War, Fimbulwinter did some damage.
It's beginning to look a lot like fuck this. I don't like the cold. I hate the fucking snow. It just has to go, because I'm going to go fucking insane.
But not only do you revisit Midgard as well as the other familiar realms, you can now visit all 9, which was a welcome addition. Midgard, Alfheim, Helheim, Svartalfheim, Muspelheim, Niflheim, Jotunheim, Vanaheim, and even Asgard. And like Midgard, all the returning ones are almost entirely different as well, offering tons of variety with new chests to find, new enemies to fight, and a whole lot more to do in general. Speaking of enemies, this game's variety of them is such a welcome change from its predecessor. On top of the already existing Draugr, Reavers, Hellwalkers, Revenants, Dark Elves, Nightmares, Wolvers, Ogres, Travelers, Tasselworms, and such, We now get light elves, human raiders who can become hell raiders upon death, weird reptilian goblin type things called the Grimm, and the Einherjar, Odin's elite force of Valhallan soldiers. And the bosses actually have diversity this time around. Instead of repeating the same 3 over and over, they come in all shapes and sizes. Of course, the main one everyone is excited for is Thor, who right out of the gate gives you an extremely fun fight in the first half hour of the game, including a 4th wall break that was really fun to watch.
Oh no. I say when we're done. I'm not leaving till I see the real you. Get up!
And we got giant bosses back. This was easily a big deal for me, seeing more giant bosses like in the God of War games of old. And thankfully enough, they are relatively far and in between to keep it from being repetitive. Also, very thankfully, there are very few troll fights, making them entirely optional with the exception of one who was killed swiftly in a cutscene. Not really a spoiler of anything major. Now speaking of spoilers, I am totally gonna ruin this game for anyone who hasn't played it yet. I'm kidding. But this story, man, it's something special. As the title suggests, the game revolves around not only surviving the impending Ragnarök, the end of the world, but also the possibility of stopping it and understanding it. Kratos and Atreus have grown closer by this point, with Kratos hardly ever calling him boy, showing how Atreus has both grown and come to be respected by Kratos in his own right. However, they do come to odds like a typical father and adolescent, going through their own rebellious phase, with Atreus wishing to learn more about his heritage, while Kratos wishes only to survive Ragnarök. It offers a very relatable angle for the father-son duo. Not only does the game center around Kratos and Atreus, there's a plethora of other compelling character arcs, especially with Freya. Even the villains have something of a decent arc, especially Thor. His dynamic with old Odin reminds me a lot of those old mobster flicks where Odin doesn't give a shit if Thor is his son. He just wants shit to get done for the sake of, shall we say, the family business.
I'm gonna make you an offer you can't refuse.
But for the sake of spoilers, I'll forego that for now. All in all, God of War Ragnarök is a fantastic sequel, and a great game altogether. With only a few bumps in the road, mostly out of habit from the 2018 game, this was by far my favorite game of the year. Last year. Definitely my game of the year. And that is why I am giving God of War Ragnarök a gallant rating of a whopping 10 out of 10.
Any man who disagrees will greet Mjolnir with his face.
To tell you the truth, when I first beat it, it was difficult for me to put above 2018's God of War, as that game set a ridiculously high bar. But upon thinking about it, everything that game did, Ragnarök did better. Now part of me does kind of wish they made it a Norse trilogy as opposed to the duology, and it shows with how crammed this game is with content. I mean that in the best possible way, mind you. But I understand where former creative director Cory Barlog, Eric Williams, directed this game. I understand where Barlog came from when he said he didn't want players to wait 10 years to finish the Norse story. Let's be real here, development takes time, especially for games on God of War's scale. But that about wraps it up for this review. God of War Ragnarök is a resounding success, and it'll keep me coming back for a long time, especially when they release the New Game Plus. But until next time, folks, I am Gallant Havoc. And I am a calm and reasonable person.